Well, it's hard to forget what happened in late March, early April with the ice storm, one that we had never experienced before, and it was crazy.
You're listening to the McBride Experience. I'm Jake, joined by my co-hosts Aaron and Jay, owners of McBride Custom Homes. We're taking you behind the scenes of custom homes, remodeling, cleaning, and property management in Northern Michigan. All right, we're going to get started. We are blessed to live in one of the most beautiful parts of the state, but especially as we come through fall and we're coming into winter, one of the things that stands out in my mind is the sort of weather that we get up here. And we want to talk about, building in this sort of weather. But I thought first it'd be good to just take a look at kind of what is an average winter like in Northern Michigan. And so some of the research I did found that we have about snow days alone, about 4.5 snow days, schools being canceled because there's enough weather to cancel school. In 2024, in January, 41 inches of snowfall for just that month. So we're talking over 3 feet, between 3 and 4 feet worth of snow in 1 month. And our season traditionally runs from about early November, sometimes late October, until about the mid to end of April. We can still get snowstorms in the end of that or inclement weather. So it's roughly 5.5 months of time for that. So when thinking about the weather that we've experienced, what are some of the storms that you guys remember or have experienced living up here in Northern Michigan?
Well, it's hard to forget what happened in late March, early April with the ice storm, one that we had never experienced before. And it was crazy. Power lines, hundreds of power lines were down, blocking roads all over the place. Trees were snapping, landing on houses, cars, garages. It was a pretty incredible thing to experience. It was sobering because we had never experienced anything like that, but it really helped us to see that, wow, this area has potential to have something damaging affecting our area. We don't get tornadoes and things like that, but this was a sobering reality that we need to be ready for a disaster.
Well, and I think too, specifically with the ice storm, normally it's measured in like fractions of an inch. They get 1/4 of an inch somewhere, and it usually shuts down a community. We had between 2 to 4 inches of ice in some places. So, what was that like for you guys? Because you guys both were out of town when that happened. So, what was that like for you? Kind of, seeing and hearing about this event while you weren't here.
Well, we felt the angst that could possibly be our clients with their homes here. Normally we're here, and when these storms happen, we're able to navigate that ourselves with our team. This time, both of us were out of town, and I was seeing it on the internet and everything, this crazy storm that hit, and people were texting and calling, and, you cannot believe what's happening here, and trees are falling in the middle of the night when they're trying to sleep, they can hear them. So we felt really bad for people at that time, but we also felt like, wow, this is the unnerving effect it can have when a client's not at their house wondering what's going on to it. So it put us in a different perspective on how compassionate, we need to be for those situations. And so communication's key for keeping people's minds at ease and letting them know we have them, we care for them, and we'll communicate as soon as we know. And thankfully, our team was out and about the very next day, I believe. Aaron was communicating with them more than I was, but they inspected every house within a couple days. So gave a different perspective for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was very much this. I was, visiting some friends downstate. It was 75 degrees and sunny. We were walking downtown Detroit, and getting these calls of what's going on was quite startling. But then it helped me to understand the value of the responsiveness of our team because our property management division, our team was communicating with me, letting me know exactly what was going on, they were sending pictures and videos, all these sorts of things. But not only that, it was their plan to care for each client that really helped to set my mind at ease. It was, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing, this is how we're communicating, all those different details. And it was that little bit of calm, that confidence, even though this is what's going on, we're in good hands. And that was an eye-opening experience, like Jay just mentioned. Like, oh, this is what this is what our clients experience, and so that helped to reassure what's of value to them.
Right, right. Well, and it's nice that we kind of get that, and this is fresh in our minds because it wasn't that long ago. But to be fair, not every winter is like that, and we don't have those once in a generation storms or once in 100-year storms. But what we do have is a ton of snow. In fact, part of what makes this region so enjoyable to be in year round is because of how much snowfall we get. There's tons of ski resorts. There's a ton of outdoor activities, snowmobiling, ATVs. Like, there's a lot to do in the winter, which is great. But then specifically kind of thinking about the homes that we're dealing with, let's talk about building and design resilience. We're trying to make do with the weather that we have, use the weather to our advantage, but also not be caught off guard when it comes to building and the things that can happen. So what are some of the challenges in building, with this sort of, with the weather that we're experiencing in northern Michigan? What are some of the things that homeowners should care about, should be concerned about? What are some of the things that you see that are important to note?
Well, for one, the roof structure is very important. I remember when I was a kid, we hardly were on a roof that wasn't 10-12 or 12-12 pitch. Most always it was a steeper pitch. Well, now there's different design elements that people want to incorporate here in northern Michigan from other parts of the country or world. A lot of times they're a 6-12 or under pitch. Sometimes they're flat roofs here now, which we never seen back in the day. Very rarely. There was very few houses. With that becomes a big design element in the home. We have to be able to stop the ice from forming, if at all possible. And if it does form, how do we navigate that if that happens? So on a steeper pitch, it's very hard to get ice. On a lower pitch, the snow sits there, and when it melts, that creates ice backs up the roof. So those are different design elements that we have to be aware of and how to prevent that from happening with different elements in the design.
In the summer, you're dealing with mostly rain and maybe a little bit of wind, but as far as withstanding the winter, that's when your house becomes the most vulnerable. Especially a lot of our homes are, on lake frontage, facing the bay, that sort of thing. And so you're getting the worst that the weather has to offer. And so not only the wind, but making sure that the house is buttoned up, using materials that, as temperatures fluctuate, they don't expand and contract. That's a big deal. Making sure that you're using materials that are appropriate for that setting, the way you insulate, it's also very much of what's best for that particular setting, that lot, that parcel, because each property has its own unique challenges sometimes with the weather. And so making sure that you have those really fine details thought out to make sure, okay, we're good. This is what we can anticipate, and we've planned, we've prepped, and we've taken the appropriate action to make sure the house is, when it's at its most vulnerable state, it's going to be able to handle that.
Well, and I think it's also important to mention too, I think both of you talked about, lake effect snow. We get tremendous amounts of weather coming from Lake Michigan. But you go just a few miles inland and it might be in very different setting. Sometimes there's a small band on the coast where if you have a house on Lake Michigan or really close to Lake Michigan, your weather might be very different from one that you experience maybe on Walloon Lake or, Burt Lake. Somewhere a little bit farther inland, you might not get some of that same really heavy lake effect wet snow. We're still dealing with a lot of snow, but how does that go into play when you think about design decisions when, whether the house is on Lake Michigan or inland, or are they about the same in terms of how you prepare a home for that?
There's definitely differences. Wind loading is huge on the Great Lakes. If you're in a big wind zone from the lake, an inland lake just doesn't get that type of wind.
Right.
It doesn't build up that across that flat of a surface. The Great Lakes are like oceans. So we've all heard of hurricanes on the oceans, but that type of wind happens on the Great Lakes. And a lot of times it's in the winter.
Yeah.
They get those northern storms that come whipping through there, and it's hurricane force winds. And difference is it's cold. So,
Right.
so it has a different element to the game. And So again, it's a lot of engineering goes into it, how the house is facing that element, really goes into how you insulate that part of it, how you even get the venting in that part of it. So we've had it happen where, different parts of Lake Michigan, it'll drive the rain up and into the eaves and drop it about 8 feet into the house. So you have to take all those elements into consideration.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, windows too, play a factor in that, in making sure they're properly insulated around that when you run thermal guns and check where there might be heat loss issues. It may not surface immediately as an issue, but those are the sorts of things that over time you're dealing with condensation, that next thing you know it, there's rot around your windows, and that stuff happens. So taking that precaution, taking those steps in the building phase to make sure it's properly insulated, there are no heat loss areas that will cause damming and issues around your windows and doors, things like that. Making sure that you're buttoned up appropriately is key.
And a lot of homeowners don't understand when you're going through like selecting windows, there's different seals that are available for the same window. Depends on what application you're putting it in. So they're a little thicker, they seal tighter. The type of window, a casement versus a double hung, what's better in what situation, can play a big factor on a lakeside of a home when it's getting those type of winds. So just educating the clients on selection choices can be huge in a home's efficiency that way too.
Well, and I think also up here, we're dealing with, wood rot. You mentioned, rot if you get moisture inside. That's a big issue. And many of the homes that were built decades ago are facing a lot of those things, maybe because they weren't designed with the sort of winters we have in mind. So are there some mistakes that you see that are fairly common, that are easy to avoid, but are worth mentioning?
In-swing French doors on a lakeside of a home. Huge problems we've ran into going and replacing those type of doors and getting the proper door. Because if you think about it, when wind comes in, it pushes the doors. If they're in swing, it pushes that seal open. We've had it where there's snow in on the floor, rain in on the floor.
Right. Yeah.
So the proper doors weren't put in for that scenario. They didn't plan for that type of wind. If we don't have a local design guy or a contractor involved in those type of decisions, that's the type of stuff we see that happens in our area. That you can get away with that in certain parts of the country.
Right.
But you're not going to get away with that when it's on a lake home facing, 70, 80 mile an hour winds.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's a really good thing to remember too, especially if a home's being designed by an architect down state or even down, some other warmer climate. Those things may not always be top of mind, and it is a really unique application for that. I hadn't thought about the French doors, but I've seen homes where the doors weren't there and the winds definitely did push in, and that doesn't make you feel good if that's in your own home, but that's a simple design change, right?
Simple design change, different style door. You can have an outswing, so that way when it swings in, it seals.
Yeah.
It seals tighter. So just little details.
Yeah. Anything else, Aaron?
Yeah, insulation really matters. As mentioned with ice dams, that's where you get issues often, is you're not properly insulated. So as it melts and that whole freeze thaw cycle happens, does its thing, if you're not properly insulated, that will start to be an issue. Next thing you know, you're dealing with things. So, making sure that that's really well thought out. It's one of those little things, or may not seem to be that important, but it's all those little things that are, how is snow sitting on this roof, or where is it sitting on the ground? That might impact. We've seen it before where windows next to the ground, there's a lot of snow, it melts, it's actually busted windows. Sure. So next thing you know it, there's an issue. We've had that before with a client where they had that very thing happen, and thankfully we were there to remedy it, but otherwise they would have had critters in the house, who knows, raccoons, squirrels, chipmunks, all these different things that doesn't take long for them to wreak havoc inside a home.
Right.
But, so making sure that all those different things are kind of thought of is important.
Think about too, like different materials used on roofing. One thing I always help try to educate a client on is steel roofing. A lot of people come here and they want a steel roof because it's longevity. But what they don't realize is when snow builds up on a steel roof and it comes off as ice, it's 2 stories up. It's going to obliterate whatever is down below it. And we've seen it just completely, ruin, landscaping, all sorts of stuff. Windows, like you said, it'll come back in and bust a window out, and could potentially hurt somebody. If you shut a door and that is enough vibration for that to come off the roof, 2 stories up.
Yeah.
So those little things, just keeping in mind, different here than even in southern Michigan, only a few hundred miles away.
Right.
Is a lot different.
Right. Well, and I think that's the key takeaway, is that we're in the same state as, Detroit and Birmingham. I mean, there's other places that people are building that may not have to think about these same design things, but to experience the beauty that Northern Michigan has, you want your home to last through any season. So, and again, this isn't an exhaustive list. We will share, for those that are listening, we will share a little checklist of things that they can do as they're going through winter to just help make sure their home's prepared. But that takes me to the next area I wanted to talk about, and that's actually our property management and preparation for these things, because most of the people that build second or third homes up here, or have estates up here, they're not here all year, or maybe not here at all during the winter. So what's some of the biggest risks that they face if they're leaving for the winter and they don't have a property management a team that's taking care of their property?
Well, big thing is making sure your house is protected as far as like freezing pipes, it's winterized correctly, those sorts of things, making sure that, circling back to the ice storm, those that had generators that were well maintained and inspected, ready to go, that was of tremendous value to them at that point, because they were able to get things up and running, get power back into the house, and prevent any further damage or risk of things like frozen pipes and so forth. So making sure the generators are good.
Is that a non-negotiable, a generator, in your mind, being up here, having a generator for Northern Michigan?
I would say for myself, yes. With kids, that plays a big comfort factor for me. But also in the wintertime, you have 20, 30 below zero, power goes out. It doesn't take long to freeze pipes.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like if you're not here year round, especially, that would be important to me, to know that's a peace of mind. The power goes out, backup generator kicks on, at least our heat's on.
Yeah.
Put it this way, we had about 6 clients that did not have generators. Prior to that, they all do now.
Yes.
They all do now, and wish that they had them. So it's just that peace of mind. It's, not just the pipes too. I mean, that's how you get drywall cracks and so forth when it really gets cold and then it heats up. There's other little things that, you see the impacts of that inside the house where it's, causes issues. So I agree. If possible, has a lot of value to it.
That's good. Well, and I think that's nice to know too, because I remember, because I was up here also during that storm, and if you didn't have a generator, it was really hard to get one because everybody was trying to get one. So there's also the factor of, and it took a few days before generators were starting to become plentiful, but that could be enough that where all your food doesn't make it through that. So thinking about then the property management team, they keep an eye on the weather. They're not weathermen, just but they do care about the weather, and they're looking out for those things because they know it will affect the homes. So what's some of the things our property management team does in anticipation of some of the storms?
Well, they have extensive checklists, for example, where they go through and they inspect everything. They make sure everything is maintained, doing the seasonal maintenance. So all the generators, but not just that, the heating system, the plumbing systems, all the different things in play with a home is properly maintained. It's been inspected. The thorough checklists have been done. So they have a measure of confidence going in that they'll be ready, and they know because of even technology systems that's in place that will notify them right away if there's a reason to be concerned inside the home. Temperatures dropping too fast, maybe there's an issue with the furnace, they get notifications, so on and so forth, so they can be responsive. And so that's key, is sometimes in a matter of minutes, an issue can be taken care of, and okay, this could have been bad, but it's not, because we were able to address it. But if unattended, it can turn into a much bigger issue.
And that's the response too, is a huge thing. So when these things happen, you've prepared, you have all those things in place, that's great. But what do you do after the storm?
Right.
You know, that's what is important to us, because we found many times a window might have gotten knocked out, a tree branch come through the roof. You know, if we weren't checking on that home immediately after the storm, you know, we could start having damage in the house, water leaking in, cold air again. You know, it doesn't take long if you have a window open and it's 20 below zero for things to get real in a hurry. So making sure that they have a game plan ahead of the storm is huge. And our team's really good at that, I feel. Like they divide and conquer each section. So one person for this section, one person for that, and another one for over here. And that just helps them to be able to get to all the homes in a timely fashion. So scheduling that, I want to say they were within a day or two, even after that big ice storm, when there was roads that were impassable. They found a way to navigate around them and got to all the homes within a couple days. So even in a state of emergency, we were able to check on those homes.
And that included, they did not have access to some of them. So they had to park their vehicles and walk to the location. And some of them, it was quite a distance, because they were down power lines. Obviously, you had to make sure it was safe to do so, but that level of commitment is essential. And that's really where, you know, and our clients were so great about it. They were so appreciative that, you know, and it was, but we, you know, those are the things you have to do. You know, we care about that, and our clients need to know that, you know, they're family to us. So it's important to us that we do get back to them right away. We can't let that sit. So.
Right. And I think too, everybody on the property management team, they views those homes as if they were their own, and how would they want their home dealt with. And I think it's also important to maybe differentiate. There's plenty of different property management companies that can keep an eye on things. What makes McBride's property management team different than that? Than they're just being passing on information. Hey, your power's out. Hey, you have a tree through your roof. What makes the McBride property management team different?
Well, we're not just reactive, we're proactive. And when we have to be reactive, when something does happen, we have the resources behind us with a construction company linked to that property management. We're able to get things done quickly. And that's key, because so many times you hear when things happen, oh, I couldn't get a plumber, or I couldn't get a heating guy out there. We have no heat. How fast can you get a heating guy out there? We've had it within hours. Them have it fixed and back up and running. Many of those type of experiences, and that's why our clients love having McBride take care of their home, because each team member does really think it's their home. And we joke a lot. Kurt will say during our meetings, you know, I feel like they're family. Well, that's awesome. That didn't come from just us. That's how he feels.
Right.
So when you have somebody caring for your home like it's their own and views you as a family member, you're going to get that type of treatment.
Yeah, so that level of investment is what you get with us. And so if that's not what you're after, we may not be the right fit for everybody. We understand that. That's okay. But for someone who really wants a team that's truly invested, like Jay says, that cares, and will do it, and will be proactive in making sure everything is taken care of, and just the responsiveness, that's what we really pride ourselves on. That's what we're about. So if you're looking for somebody to just swing by casual, just do a drive-by once a month, you know, we may not be the right fit. But if you're looking for someone truly hands-on, very invested, that's where we start leaning into maybe being the right fit.
Yeah, and I wanted to just differentiate that, because there are different organizations that do that kind of thing, and I know it's nice that we can not only identify the issue, but we can remedy it very quickly, which when we're talking about inclement weather and all the things that can happen, that is critically important. Now, Aaron, you mentioned something about some of the technology that kind of goes into monitoring some of these things. So do you recommend any sort of monitoring technology? Is there anything that can help individuals when a storm comes, or any, sensors or cameras that have helped people? What can you share about that?
Yes, nowadays, especially with the influence of smart home technology, there's a lot of different things in place that can send notifications, that keeps you in the loop, that has pictures, videos, monitoring systems that can be used, that is really basically your first line of defense. That tips us off to, whether or not something is happening inside the home that's unusual. So then we can respond to that immediately if we have those notifications. But yeah, whether that's leak detection, whether that's humidity, being outside the ranges of normal, temperature systems, security cameras, there's a lot of different things that we can do to make sure that the home is being properly monitored.
And one thing to keep in mind too, I feel like with technology, smart homes, they can fail. Internet goes out. So what happens in there? That's the key to having a pulse on the home.
Yeah.
To know the key features of that home. What happens if those things fail? What's the backup? And putting those things in place, the checklist is huge. Hey, internet's out. Why? Did the power go out? Is it just an internet fail? What's going on for weather? So that's the key thing to know about confidence in tech, but also verifying tech is working. We all know it has its issues. If it goes down, and there's nothing replaces the human touch.
Yeah, and it's really, there's been many times where that responsiveness, because of that technology, has really prevented a major loss. And so, that's been a key factor, or I don't know the right word, but it's such a help with our team that it's a powerful tool. There we go. And so leaning into that. So because of that, we're constantly keeping a pulse on technology, especially as it's advancing and new things that are coming out, making sure what its pros and cons are will help us to even continue to improve our services and implement new things that will even further benefit, the home and its well-being.
One thing too, having these sensors in place, it really helps mitigate something when it happens.
Yeah.
If a pipe burst and you have that sensor, at least you know.
Yep.
We had a home one time that we walked into it. The client called me, and she was just devastated over the amount of damage that happened to her home because she wasn't in the home for 2 to 3 months. The pipe burst in the upper bathroom, and it completely flooded the house. It was running for 2 to 3 months. Fan blades were drooping. The ceiling was just completely destroyed from top to bottom, gut. And that just could have been prevented with one sensor, a water sensor, a flow sensor, something to say, hey, something's not right. Go check the house. There might still be damage, but it's not going to be a whole home damaged.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the things that go unnoticed that sometimes make the biggest impact. For example, along with what Jay's saying, a sump pump. Nobody ever thinks about that. But if you've got water coming into the house, in your basement, instead of that water being remediated, now that becomes an issue because there's been basements that have really wished they had a functioning sump pump. And we've had clients tell us before that how grateful they are because they invested in that technology in making sure that they're protected, even though it's not a glamorous thing to invest in, but when your house is protected and you're seeing your neighbors' homes, basements flood and yours is protected and safe, no issues, then that's when you really begin to appreciate that value and those little things that do actually make a big impact.
And I think that's amazing because you both talked about the technology that can help prevent these things, but you still need a human factor in this. And while it isn't glamorous, the property management team does spend a lot of time verifying systems are working and checking to make sure, because it's out of sight, out of mind. If you have a sump pump in your basement, you might just assume that it's working, but it hasn't needed to work in 10 years. Maybe it's rusted, it's rusted. Maybe there's something else happening. So it's nice to know that there's actually a team that goes in and verifies all these things are working in case there is a disaster or, some inclement weather.
Things that a lot of homeowners don't maybe think about. It's not just the home, but it might be accessory things, hot tubs. Power goes out and the hot tub doesn't turn back on. So if our team knows the power goes out, they go out and check, because that hot tub in the wintertime can become a big block of ice in a short order. So just things like that you don't even think about as being part of your home, but it is really a part of your home, and they cost a lot of money to replace. And this can just prevent those type of things from happening.
Yeah, and not to mention the assets you have in the home, whether that's artwork or, vehicles, whatever else is there, that also benefits from having someone take care of it. So thinking then, you've mentioned several stories of, things working right or not working right. Is there anything else that you would, advice you would give to people who want to build up here, specifically when it comes to that winter prep? What sort of things would you, if you had a couple minutes to share with them, what would you want them to know? What's a must know?
Think about who is going to take care of your home when it's built. It's not just the build. That's a great experience, should be a great experience, but it's what happens after the build. It's when the wind isn't blowing in your house. We went into a property we were thinking about investing in, and it's a brand new home, and the doors were literally whistling from the wind because they didn't use the right material. They didn't use the right seals on these doors. These are brand new doors, and you could feel them pushing in from the wind, and it was cranking about 50, 60 mile an hour that day off the lake. But that told us right there that, wow, this is what some people get to experience, on a brand new home, and how disheartening that can be, really, as, you want to produce something in the home for them that's their dream home, and then to have them sit there in the winter and be comfortable and be confident that that's going to be the home they've dreamt about and not a disaster, or there's air leaks in their home. They're listening to the wind whistle. It's, right. Those little nuisances can be really affecting how they feel about the whole home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to add to that, I would say invest in resilience. Build for the worst case scenario. As mentioned, there's all these, you don't see them when you're enjoying the home, living your life. Normally, all those systems in place easily can be forgotten. But those systems, those sensors, all of those things, when we think about all the little details, they matter, especially in those moments. Ice storms don't come around every day, but when they do, those are the moments that you really are thankful and like, I am so glad that I did this, because now I have this peace of mind that is priceless. And so that would be my encouragement, is to invest in that resilience. It's not glamorous, fun spent, but it's peace of mind, and there's value to that.
And two, I'd invest in a company that is invested in you.
Yeah.
For the long term. We don't just build homes, we build relationships. And so when you have something go wrong, something's going to go wrong, right? It's what it is. Something's going to fail at some point in the time. Somebody might not put something on right. You can't micromanage every part of that project as hard as we try. When it goes wrong, how do you respond? How does a builder back up what they have for you in building that home? Because that gives you peace of mind. If you call a guy, there's nothing worse than having something go wrong and you call somebody and they don't answer.
Right.
They're no longer in business.
Right.
Those things. So doing their due diligence on who they're hiring, what they're hiring, and what they want out of that experience is huge.
Well, and that's really what it comes down to. McBride's been around for 40 plus years, relationships for 40 plus years. You're on sometimes a second or third generation of a different home being built for the same family. We're all invested. We're all invested in the success of that home. It is not a get it done, build it, move on to the next one. We can't wait for them to celebrate their family memories in this and for them to enjoy it as much as we know that they will. So thank you both for sharing, some of those critical key things that would be beneficial and helpful. And we hope that this winter will be a fun winter with just the right amount of snow and not too much, not too little. But yeah, thank you again, guys. That's another McBride experience with Jake, Aaron, and Jay. Subscribe, share with friends, and send us your construction questions. This is where every home has a story and every story matters. Until next time.